Research-led teaching is becoming very strong in the institution ILTS. In the ILTS, it talks about the word research-led teaching. It talks about student-centered teaching, and very much, in many instances, the same thing. In the ILTS implementation strategy, it talks about undergraduate student research. Now, what I'm going to present to you right now is a number of policies, considerations, things like that that you want to address within your departmental learning and teaching strategy that will meet this kind of an agenda. I'm going to read an excerpt from a book from Jenkinson, Healy, and Zitter. It's called Linking Teaching and Research in Discipline and Departments. This agenda itself is quite big actually in the US. Research-led teaching in US institutions is a very important way that they engage with their students. But this actually comes from a department at the University of Oxford. I'm just going to read a quick excerpt for you. Earth Sciences has among the highest student ratings on a number of scales of the Oxford Student Experience Questionnaire. It is rated particularly highly as intellectually stimulating. Students believe that they benefit from being in contact with active researchers. The central social space in the department has posters on the walls that have just come back from conferences. It would not be possible for students to be unaware of what research was being undertaken or who was undertaking it. In this social space, informal discussion of research, with undergraduates involved, seemed to be going on constantly. Students were invited into research projects in the lab or in the field in an ad hoc way if they showed interest. Students were being inducted into a community of practice rather than only being taught, and there were blurred distinctions between teaching and research, with everyone simply doing geology. This is the most striking example encountered. Now that's a vision, in a sense, of the kind of culture that could meet throughout SLIMS, throughout the departments within SLIMS itself. Now, a lot of the things that my colleagues have been talking about, this agenda goes into employability, it goes into key skills, it goes into the internationalization agenda, and it goes into the curriculum development in the ways that we teach it. And it's very simple things: inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning. Strategies like this that are focused on that kind of approach are, in a sense, we're inducting our students into the ways and working practices of what it is to be a researcher and what it is to be an academic in these fields. And these considerations, which I'll go through right now, are essentially the ways and the considerations within your DLTS that you want to make to be able to start moving your department that way. But to give you a quote of exactly what research-led teaching is, this is from the University of Sydney, cited by Brew in 2006. Research-led teaching refers to initiatives to bring the research and teaching functions of the university closer together. The aim is to enhance students' learning experiences by progressing the ways in which coursework teaching is informed by disciplinary-based research at all levels. So that's essentially what it is. It's bringing research and teaching together into one, almost at a structural and organization level, where we have both research committees and teaching committees as the same thing. So we talk about developing the policies and structures within the department. We talk about curriculum and research-based learning, what you do on the teaching level, the management organization of staff in your department, and then also creating that inclusive culture, that culture that I described for you just now in that excerpt of the case study. So, developing policies. How does the teaching strategy explicitly relate to the research strategy in the department? To what extent do the research centers, the research groups within your departments and within your faculties, how do they inform and support the teaching that's done? Can you identify where research-based learning is integrated in the course and programs? Is there a way that in your course evaluations that you identify how that's brought into? What are the research skills, methods, ethics taught? Where are they practiced? Is it progressive? Are these things from the very first year in undergraduate that we start to build into the curriculum to induct students into the types of research skills that they need in these disciplines? Or is it something that they just do in a project? Now, progressively would be the way that is suggested, because then they build the repertoire of skills that they need to practice in that discipline. Can and do students participate in departmental research projects? Is there research assistance, even on a voluntary basis? I did my MSc, my second MSc here at UCL. One of the most valuable things for me was the fact that when I was in the class, I could go up to somebody after and say, what kind of research are you doing right now? Can I be involved in it? And what I ended up doing wasn't part of my course. I ended up running subjects and decision-making experiments and memory experiments because it gave me a way of understanding what it was to do research and not just read the research, and not just the stuff that's being taught to us. It was a way of understanding explicitly what it was that they were talking about. And you understand the methodology then much better when you're involved in that methodology. So how is it that in our departments and in our courses, we're allowing that space for students to be involved? Is there scope for students to conduct independent research in their programs? In what ways can they do this? Is there a way that even in every course, in every module, there's some kind of research element that they're doing throughout that module that leads to an assessment at the end, that is part of a coursework project in a broader sense? How are research skills and links between teaching and research embedded and monitored? So is there a way within our department and within our programs that we can monitor this, the research element, how we're inducting students into this discipline? How are students supported in making explicit how the research, training, and knowledge increases their employability? So in many cases, key skills we embed in a curriculum, we embed it in the things they do in a classroom, so that, for instance, research projects, they have to understand research skills and they have to be able to do the research to do the project. But at the same time, how are we getting them to understand that that's not just a skill that's used there in research, that's actually a skill that's also used in the wider world, and we're making links to that so that they understand that it's not just research in neuropsychology or educational psychology or medical science, it's actually a skill that they can use and take into their jobs when they leave, if they don't go into a research career. Organizational structure and the staffing. How are teaching and research activities organized, motivated, resourced for mutual engagement, really? What's the cross-fertilization happening? Are all researchers involved in teaching? Even at every possible level, from doing small seminars to doing one-to-one student support, for instance. How are non-research active teaching staff mentored and encouraged to develop a scholarly profile? How do research teams and course teams link with each other, and how are these facilitated? Are they the same thing? Do research teams across the departments, are they the same as the teaching teams? Or is it just one or two people? And how does that happen? And could it be developed in that way? How are new staff and incoming students acculturated into the departmental values? How does someone that has joined the psychology department or joined the neuropsychology, how do they understand what it is to be and become part of that department, and what things are in place in that department to induct them into? And it's not just the stuff of being a student, it's the stuff of being a neuropsychologist or a medical scientist. How is staff and student experience of the Nexus monitored and the results fed back into the policies of the department? So at a course level, what are we doing, and how is that built then into the departmental policies and structures? Creating an inclusive culture, that culture that I described for you in that case study. How is the research culture and activity given visibility to students? As an MSc student, or even an undergraduate student, how do I know when the research, the eminent people within my department are giving a talk in the department? How is that communicated to us as a student? Are there places they can go for that? Is it up on the boards? Is it up on the walls? Is it up on the learning and teaching portal? How are these things communicated to students? How do they get there? And how do they meet these people? How do we put those people together, the researchers and the students? What are the strategies to disseminate research-based teaching experience from the module level? And lastly, what profile is given to discipline-based pedagogic research? And now this is just a little bit veering from when we're talking about the research-led teaching, but it's under the same umbrella. And it's how is the research disseminated and applied within the program? So how does evidence-based approaches to teaching, what we know is effective teaching, how is that fed into the programs? Now I'm going to make a comment on this specific point because it relates to something we found out just recently, which I can't confirm yet because I only found out yesterday, but apparently in the next REF impact, it says a key area where teaching activity can potentially feed into research outputs. It will account for 25% in the next REF that, for instance, edited publication of student research or discipline-specific research in that discipline and context potentially may be part of the next REF. And again, I only found out this yesterday, so I haven't been able to confirm that. But that essentially means, part of the RAF means that the publications of our students could potentially contribute to that. Now, I don't know that per se. It's something we're looking into, but I think it was important to mention in this specific instance. Rosalind and I are working on right now a proposal that we're taking to the Education Board, and it's to suggest policy, structural, and curriculum changes and adaptations to SLIMS to increase and to essentially create the culture of the case study that I've just was saying to you. And we're trying to develop these proposals that will meet this agenda. But in many instances, right now, UCL is in a perfect place to be able to take an agenda like this and bed the research within the teaching, and as our Vice Provost has said in the past, make teaching equivalent to research at an international level.